So the final question, and I think the question that people need to be asking now, comes from our very good friend Adele Slater. In the short term, what do you think about the government using lockdown or the COVID crisis to further radical economic transformation, expropriation without compensation, black economic empowerment, and so forth, that kind of ideology? And then Adele cuts to the heart of it. What can citizens do to prevent this from happening?
Okay, Adele, good morning to you. Thank you for you being on this call too. I think that the track record to date suggests that the ideologues and the securocrats have exploited the COVID pandemic much better than what remains of the ANC's pragmatists and than business has done, and that they've won some ground. And I expect that that will continue, and that for a time, the fear of the virus and then the longer term consequences of the economic devastation wrought will be exploited by the securocrats and the ideologues again to set a number of negative policy precedents on civil rights. I mean, we've got a curfew. I mean, where the civil rights group saying, no, hang on, what has happened? You can be investigated by the police if you say something that is deemed to be at odds with the official sanctioned view on the pandemic. It's very dangerous. I think that more of that will continue. I think on the economy, you've seen the early steps. Masondo now talking about the Reserve Bank financing the state. Price controls have been introduced. Very completely counterproductive, because controls always bring about shortages, and secondly, unnecessary, because in a free society like South Africa, social pressure, social media will quickly uncover any corporate institution that engages in price gouging. So I think these setbacks will persist, Adele, for a time, and they will further open the way to moves on expropriation and national health insurance, which is essentially the expropriation of private healthcare funds and institutions, and that will continue for a time. I anticipate that, but I think that very continuation will bring about the circumstances in greater numbers than is already the case reject. Should we do enough to retain the basic trappings of democracy, the inflection point will come in a future election and they'll be rejected. So they win, they advance successfully for a time, not realizing that what they read as their successes is ultimately creating the circumstances for their eventual demise. A point we made about Mandela and Mbeki and Mbeki's letter last year. What to do is straightforward. Societies only change at points of crisis. And the trajectory of that change is dictated, this is the rule, by the group that had the greatest influence on public opinion at the point of the crisis. It's shaping of opinion that shapes societies. The reason the transition of the 1980s and 1990s was relatively successful was not happenstance or accident, but because of the enormous amounts of time and money and effort invested by groups such as then Anglo-American in support of institutions such as the IRR and others to shape a climate of opinion that would be conducive to reform. How did it happen that two nationalist movements, the ANC and the Nats, negotiating with each other, came up with a fundamentally liberal constitution? That stuff doesn't happen by accident. And if you want to ensure that South Africa is going to be a success towards the end of this decade, what you need to do is get in that fight yourself, the fight about ideas and opinion. You need to join and support the institutions that shape opinion. You need to take the lead and the information they provide you and distribute that around your own community. And you need to ensure that those ideas become embedded. Because then when the great crisis is reached, and you should be quite optimistic actually on South Africa's future if you understand battle of ideas theory, because the crisis is really not very far away. This is it. It's coming. And you should ensure that you have supported and actively engaged in the distribution of the ideas that you want to see underpinning the basis of government policy towards the end of this decade and into the 2030s. And the only, ultimately, I've said this third book's my last one, but we'll review that in 30 years' time and see. If there is a fourth book on South Africa, I think the third book will stand, I think, for 20 years. I'm confident in its conclusion. If there's a fourth book and South Africa hasn't worked out, I know what I'll write, that it wasn't inevitable that it wouldn't. The reason we ultimately failed as a society is that too few people with the means and ability to be influential in shaping the climate of public opinion actually made an effort to do so. And I'm not talking there about large corporations. Their responsibilities are short-term quarterly responsibilities to shareholders. They don't shape society. I'm talking about ordinary people. Reading the biography of my predecessor, John Cain Berman, which you should read, it struck me how few people were actually enormously influential in shaping the opinions, literally, 10 people, in shaping the opinions that became the basis of much of South Africa's transition. It took a handful of disciples to drive Christianity around the world. Marx sat in an armchair and thought, inspired revolutions to this day around the world. Ideas are hugely powerful, and that is why governments under pressure go to such lengths to discount or undermine institutions that create ideas that are at odds with theirs. There's nothing as powerful as an idea whose time has come. And this is why dictators and authoritarian governments shoot people that come up with ideas and burn books, because they know how very dangerous it is. The ideas get out. The most important and powerful thing you can do now, people who generate the ideas that...
Frans, I'm really sorry to stop you there. We lost you at a crucial point again. You said most powerful thing you can do now.
The most important thing I think people can do now, in addition to the various other, first, run your business well and employ people and do your best to be a good citizen. But there is a space, and this is critical. Not enough people do it. Invest yourself. The most powerful thing now, invest yourself and the community around you in the institutions that create the ideas upon which the future South Africa will be built. It's not a question of vast amounts of money. We've recruited many thousands of supporters. Ordinary people send us modest contributions every month. The effect of that is just been amazing in what it has allowed us to do to expand our reach. And get involved in those ideas, circulate them in your community, invite speakers to come and talk. We'll come, on the internet. We used to travel, but the army has prevented that from happening. The circulate ideas, associate with the institutions that do the same, and you will be part of building the groundswell of opinion upon which a new and better South Africa will ultimately be built. Harriman, thank you very much.